Welcome, everyone. It's Natalie here, and today we're going to talk about the gap. What is that gap? Why we as parents struggle to understand our children when they are upset, especially, or when they are engaging into behaviors that we are not able to understand. Why are they doing that? Why do they keep doing this even when I ask them to stop, or I explain to them why it's not a good thing? So there is a gap there between us and our children because we're not able to understand why they're doing it, and we are not understanding what's going on with them. So what causes this gap, you may ask? And we all experience that as parents, and perhaps we all experience it even with other people, other adults as well, where sometimes we can't understand why are they engaging in certain behaviors, or why are they saying certain things to us, and why are they reacting a certain way to us. So this whole kind of unknown out there when it comes to being on the same wavelength. And when we're not on the same wavelength, there's a disconnect that is happening. And so this is what I'll be talking today. And I'm going to introduce myself as a mom of 3 boys. And 2 of my boys now are teenagers, and I also have a 9-year-old. And I've been on this fascinating journey, just like you, as a parent, and learning what is going on, not only with my own children when they are behaving in a certain way, but also learning about myself, understanding myself deeper, to get to know why I perceive things a certain way and why I also respond or react a certain way, especially during those times when I'm being challenged by my children, or I'm perceiving that I'm being challenged by them. And so this journey I've been very interested in, and learning about the development of children, and learning about my own history and understanding of when I was growing up, and how that plays a role today in the way I show up as a parent, and what needs to happen if I want to change certain of my habits and my responses towards my children. And so this is what put me on this path of, I've discovered a lot of things that I wish I knew when my children were very young, from the get-go. But I had to go on this journey to learn them. And I am here today. Hopefully that's going to help you kind of doing a shortcut by me providing you the information of really understanding the dynamics that goes on between us and our children, and how our past experiences has a role to play in the way we show up, and also then that affects how our children are responding and behaving as well. And so I'm here to share information with you, and hopefully this information can be helpful to you, even if there's maybe one thing today that will bring a sense of awareness for you, then this is my goal. So without waiting, I'm going to delve into the material for today and expand on what is causing the gap. So there's different factors that is causing this gap. First, there's communication barriers, right? So parents and children may have different communication style. We know as adults, we have different communication style. Some people like to explain things. Some people like to be more quiet. And so with our children, it's the same thing. They have different personality and different ways they've learned how to communicate. And maybe when children are very young as well, they don't have the resources and the ability yet to communicate as we do as adults. So that makes it very challenging then to understand a child, and also maybe for them to understand us as well, where we're coming from. So children may not have the language skills to express themselves clearly as we do as an adult. So that's one thing we need to understand. They don't just come out of the womb and able to communicate with us as clearly as we can. It is a skill. Communication is a skill, and know that that skill is learned by watching us and watching teachers and see how others are communicating with them. So if the communication is problematic and a child is having problem as they're growing up to communicate with us, perhaps it's a reflection on how we are also communicating with them, and learning that how to help them understand by changing the way we are saying things, we're approaching things, or the tone of voice we're saying things, for that matter. All of that contributes to helping our kids communicate, right? So children may not have the language, so they then behave in a certain way, and that behavior usually grabs our attention. But the behaviors that we're not understanding, why are they behaving in a certain way, may not be saying what they need. It's just trying to grab our attention. So, for example, if a child starts to whine, and when they whine, it grabs our attention, and we then pay attention to them. Their little mind may register, okay, whenever you do this, it will get their attention. So when they don't know how to communicate with us, their little mind will think, okay, what is it that's going to get their attention, be it a good attention or bad attention, but it will get my parents' attention or my teacher's attention. Then they engage into that kind of behavior to grab our attention. So understanding that behaviors are just symptoms, they're there most of the time, especially with younger kids, to grab our attention. They're not using the behavior to make our lives difficult. They're just trying to get our attention because they haven't been able to. Because in those moments where they need our attention, most likely they need help. They are feeling something that they don't know what they're feeling, or they're feeling something as well as they're needing help to process and to regulate. So for instance, if a child is overstimulated and they're tired, but they're not able to do it by themselves, to take the time to wind down and to calm down, then they feel a certain way in their body. It's very somatic, that they're feeling this in their own body, and they don't have the words to tell us what's going on. So then they will engage into a behavior that then grabs our attention, even if that behavior they know will grab negative attention. So hopefully that's making a little bit of sense to you, to understand why your children may be saying, doing different things that you don't understand why they're doing it. Another thing is power dynamics, because as parents, we're bigger than our children, usually when they're younger. And we also have more power and more authority than our children. And so being careful on how we're using that power and that authority. We have the power to set boundaries. We have the power to reason and to see the big picture of what's happening, unlike our children whose brain hasn't developed yet. So it's important for us to have that power and that authority, because if they do engage in something that is risky and dangerous, we want to be able to stop them. However, if we are not giving them the agency to communicate with us, to say how they feel, or when they don't agree, or when they want to say no. Remember, I did a live on will and counter will, and what is happening at starting with the terrible twos when they start to say no. A child wants to start becoming their own. It's part of their development. So if we constantly use our power and authority in a way that the child is not able to start becoming their own, then that becomes problematic, because it'll be difficult for our child to express themselves honestly. And they also don't feel heard if all they hear is us telling them what to do, what not to do, and they are not able to also share with us what they're feeling, right? So being able to express their feelings and emotion is very important for a child to communicate with us. And communication is actually a good thing, because it helps us also to understand the perspective of our children, right? Just like another adult, there could be a situation where we are okay with what is going on, but another person may find that situation triggering. And so by telling us that this is how they feel, then we can start to develop empathy towards that person and be more understanding, rather than us seeming to be disregarding how they're feeling in those moments. So, and know that these emotional barriers, children may feel embarrassed or ashamed or share certain experiences or feelings when they're happening, right? So there may be a situation at school or with a friend where they felt embarrassed, where they felt, they perceived that they were less than. We want our children to come to us and to share that with us, because usually the meaning they're putting to those situations are also problematic, because they are not understanding the big picture here like we do as an adult. So sometimes their friends may say something to them that's triggering, and then they may perceive that they are less than in those moments. If they come to us as a parent and say, this is what happened at school with me, with my friend today, and I'm really sad about it. And so we can be there for them. We can validate, okay, yes, I see that you're really sad. Do you want to talk about it? And so by opening that communication, we can also help them to see a different perspective of what happened with their friend at school. And so they don't put that meaning that they're not good enough for their friend or they're less than their friend, because most of the times that's not the case, even if their friend said something in a way that was derogative or negative, according to them. So allowing our children to express their emotions is very, very important. The number 2 thing is developmental differences that children have. So children, we know they go through various stages, from infant to toddler, from toddler to a child, and then to a preteen, and then to teen. So there's different various stages of development happening during these periods of time of their childhood. And so their needs and their interests and their abilities also change. It's very evolving as a child. So as they're evolving, sometimes we struggle as parents to understand our children if we don't adapt to these changes that are happening. What used to work when they're a baby doesn't work when they become a toddler. What works when they're a toddler doesn't work when they are 8, 9 years old, when they're preteen. And what worked as a preteen doesn't work when they are now full grown teenagers, for instance. So having children and parenting requires us to evolve as a parent, because if we don't evolve and adapt, then we get stuck into having certain perceptions and expectations. And when they are not met, and we are then being bombarded by seeing our children behaving in ways that we're not able to understand because we're not adapting to their changes, then that creates that gap and widens the gap more and more. So hopefully this is making sense. If not, do reach out to me and you can ask your questions. Number 3 is personal biases. And let's face it, we all have our personal biases. We all make assumptions according to our expectations and beliefs, which then can come in the way of us having the ability to understand our children. For example, a parent may assume that their child is just lazy or not interested in going to school because they're lazy, which can then lead to overlook the child's true motivation and struggles. Because we know now, and you've heard me say that many, many times, that behaviors are just an attempt to solve a problem. So if our child is not doing their homework, or they're not doing their homework on time, which happens all the time, then instead of just labeling the child as being lazy, which is a perception and assumption that maybe we're quick to grab, instead do something different. Instead of assuming, maybe becoming curious, right? Because when we assume, then we think we know what's going on. And when we think we know what's going on, then we impose those expectations on our children and other people. And when our children are not able to meet our expectations, then it creates that gap, because our children don't feel good, and we also as parents don't feel good. So very, very important that we don't just assume. Remember the 4 agreements. I did a live on that as well. And one of the agreements is to never assume that we know what's going on with our children. Instead, we need to attune, we need to use our gut feeling instead of assuming the first thing that comes to mind. That's the case, right? Maybe it is, but instead of just quickly going towards the assumptions, why not investigate and become curious and understanding our child? And I will give you some tips of what to do in order to become curious and how to investigate and have a better understanding. Number 4 is lack of time. Let's face it, we have busy schedule as parents. You may be a parent that stay at home, but you may also be a working parent. And so there are demands in life. You may have multiple children, different responsibilities, and that can get in the way of us parents from spending quality time with our children. And when we don't spend quality time with our children, and our children, remember, they are continuously growing and evolving, that then put a barrier between us and them and our ability to understand what is going on with them. So children, one of their most essential attachment needs is attunement. They need a parent to attune to them. They need a parent to see them, to hear them, to understand them. And so they can get the right feedback from parents with regards to parents guiding children, right? Us guiding our children. Without the attunement, without us really knowing what's going on with our child, it's difficult then to meet the needs that they have, because everybody's different, every child is different, and every child at different stage need different things. So it's not a cookie cutter kind of recipe of how we're going to attend to our children's needs. It requires our attunement. And without spending quality time with our children, that attunement can't happen. And when it doesn't happen, the child will also feel it. And again, when they feel it, sometimes they can't, they're not able to express that to us, or if they're a little bit older, they may say, Mom and Dad don't want to spend that time with me. They may assume things as well, which is then our role as parent to make sure that they know that it's, even if we're busy, even if there's some things that happens in our lives, which often does, and we're not able to spend that time with them, very important that we make sure we tell them that it's not because we don't want to spend time with them, and that there are certain things that's going on that needs our immediate attention. But if there is something that they actually need from us, that they can come to us anytime, right? So leaving the door open, even when we're very busy and not able to make time for them, right? Not on a long-term basis, but on a short-term basis, right? So lack of time, become aware when that is happening for us, so we can communicate that with our children so they can become aware. And when we have a lack of time, so usually if quality time means half an hour or more with a child, then maybe quality time is there, but less. We can maybe find 10 minutes at night to spend with our child, or 10 minutes in the morning, whenever that time is for you. So at least the child is getting the connection with the parent. Number 5 is generational differences. And that's a major one. So if you can grasp this, then this will really help you, and maybe starts to uncovering what those generational differences, how they play a role, right? So parents and their children come from different generation. We come from a different generation than our children. We were born in a different era. Just like our parents were born in a different era and our grandparents were born in a different era, which means then that we have different values, beliefs, and perspectives on things. And we know that from one generation to another, we don't usually see things the same way as our parents saw things, as our grandparents saw things. And sometimes from one generation, we want to impose that on the next generation to see things the same way that they happened for us. But the truth is that we are all living and growing in different periods of time. And we know that even in our culture, everything is evolving nowadays. The world is evolving. So this is what can lead to misunderstandings and difficulties in our communication. This contributes to the gap. So the belief we have acquired during our own childhood, right? So beliefs are formed in childhood because that's when we start to learn, especially those first 7 years of life. We just watch what adults are doing, how they're responding, what we're hearing, what people are doing all the time, the habits, the behaviors, the words that are being said, and those beliefs are acquired in our childhood. However, as we grow up, as time passes, beliefs becomes outdated, they become limited and not applicable anymore. Some of them may be applicable, but a lot of them are not applicable. So our beliefs also were formed when we were children. The first set of beliefs were formed when we were children. And again, as children, we put meanings to what was happening from a limited perspective because our brain hasn't fully developed. And we know a child can't reason, especially the first 7 years of life. They just absorb and take things as they are. They usually don't start questioning until they get to about 7, 8 years old, and then they start questioning everything. Or they may question things, but whatever you tell them when they're 4 or 5 years old is what they're going to believe, right? So those meanings that we put to things that form those beliefs are usually not true, especially when it comes to beliefs that are no longer working for us today, right? So even our belief about parenting, right? We watch how our parents were behaving, what were they telling us? What did they do when they were upset? So, years ago, things like corporal punishment, isolation was what parents believe were good to do to teach their children what is right and what is wrong. So that was a belief that was developed, was passed down maybe from our grandparents to our parents, or even older than that. But we know today that isolation and corporal punishment do more harm. So that's a belief. Same thing like, oh, you're going to spoil your baby if you hold them all the time. That was a belief that our grandparents or parents had. But we know today that a baby actually needs to be held. They need that proximity with us to feel attached to us, to feel safe, to feel secure. And that promotes connection. But if we believe that, we shouldn't spoil our babies and we shouldn't hold them and we should just leave them to cry for a long period of times, this is actually creating disconnection. Same thing with isolating a child when we're upset at them, or applying corporal punishment to teach them a lesson. And we know now research has shown that comes at the detriment of the child. And so that's not something we as parents want today. So this is a belief that we need to shift if we have that kind of belief. And we may have other beliefs as well that, relates to our assumptions and perceptions and expectations of how our children should behave, or what they should be doing, or what they shouldn't be doing, and so on. So we all come with a set of belief, and at one point or another, we need to question those beliefs, because most of the time, I can tell you now, working with parents and my own experience is that that's the root cause of why we're not able to understand our children, and why we're not able to respond a lot of times with being calm and grounded with our children when they're engaging into this certain behaviors that we are perceiving as bad or whatever it is, because we have an underlying belief at the root of it. And in order to fix this, we need to get to the root of what's causing us to react, respond, or have certain expectations. Because when we address the root cause, then we can change our perspective, our expectations. Then we can understand our child better. We can better attune to them. And when we can better attune to their needs and meet their needs, then they don't need to engage in any kind of behaviors to draw or get attention if they're already getting the attention from us. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to go maybe into more depth for you to understand this concept and or to answer your questions around it. So here are some ways that parents can understand their children better. Listen actively. So just like we want others to listen to us, our children want us to listen as well. It is important as parents to listen to our children without interrupting and dismissing their feelings. And it's the opposite that we want to do, is validate our children's feelings and emotions in the moment, because when they get hurt physically and they're feeling something, they're crying, they want to know that we are there for them, that we see what happened and that we can understand that it's hurting them. So be it if it's physical pain that they're experiencing, but also emotional pain if their brother hit them or took their toy, that we are there that we've witnessed it, and even if we didn't witness it, we understand why it's painful for them, because often they may not understand why it's painful for them. So by us mirroring and validating, okay, this is actually painful and I get it, they feel understood and they feel heard. And in the moment that they feel understood and heard, then they feel safe with us. And then that helps them to regulate the emotions that they're feeling again in their own body. Number 2, ask questions instead of telling. Asking open-ended questions to encourage children to express their thoughts and feelings. So I covered that early on, that it's important to allow our children to express their feelings and emotions. And so by us being curious and asking questions, then they can open up and share more information with us. And this can help us parents gain insight into our children's experiences and their own perspectives. Okay, what is the lens that they are seeing things through? Because we know that as adults, we know that this situation is not a life and death situation. But for our children, they don't know that perhaps, and they are looking at things into a very gloomy perspective. And that's what's creating a lot of strong emotions with them. For example, if they're scared at night, or if they have a bad dream that may really be disruptive to them. And in those moments, they need us to comfort them. So, we can comfort them, validate their feelings, their emotions. And when they calm down, we can ask these open-ended questions and become curious. Okay, what is it that was going on? Or we can give them choices as well to promote agency and for them to see that we value their input, right? If there are, some things that they want to do this afternoon, maybe giving them choices of what would you prefer? Do you want to go to the park, or you want to stay inside and play a board game? And then they can make their choices, and we can become curious. Okay, why don't you want to go outside? Or why do you want to stay inside? So then they can express, well, if I go outside, I'm a little bit tired today, right? So, and I don't want to be more tired. So then you allow them to express what they're feeling. Number 3, spending quality time together. Spending time with our children, doing activities that they enjoy, playing, being outdoors. This can really help us parent better understand our children's interests, their strengths and challenges, right? There are continuously evolving and growing, and we know how fast that happens. I can tell you it goes fast. I know when they're young, it doesn't seem like it. But now that two of my kids are teenagers, I can tell you that it goes really fast. So our children are continuously growing and evolving. So spending quality time with them help us to stay connected with them and attuned and becoming aware of those changes happening within them. Right. So, and that helps us understand them better, and it narrows that gap between not understanding them, because if we leave too much time and our child is just used to staying in their room all the time and never talk to us and never connect with us, it's harder, right? Especially because I've worked with parents who have teenagers and they tell me, well, my child just stay in their room. They never come out. They don't tell me anything. And then it's a harder, it's harder than to reconnect with our children when they get to that age, because the gap has widened, and now there's more work to do to narrow that gap. Number 4 is showing empathy, right? So as parents, we can put ourselves in our children's shoes and understand their feelings and experiences, because we were children once ourselves, but we forget because it's been a long time that we've been a child, but we have that capacity and ability to put ourselves in their shoes to understand what may they be feeling right now, what is hurtful. And a lot of that has to do with attuning to our own gut feelings, because when we can connect with our own gut feelings, we will also be able to connect to what is going on with our children. So this work is also very important, that awareness that we have with our own bodies and understanding what we're feeling and how to stay connected with ourselves, and our body can help us also connect with our children. And that really helps build the trust and mutual understanding of each other when we can show empathy, when we know what they're going through and we understand, we validate their feelings and emotions, and we can be there to hold them in those moments of pain, in those moments of anger, of frustration, or whatever it is that our children are facing. Number 5, respecting our children's autonomy. It is important, again, for us to respect their autonomy and allowing them to make age-appropriate choices. Remember, again, going back to the counterwell, when children start to learn to say no because they want to become their own, they want to be able to exert and develop their own willpower, because that's essential as we become an adults, to be able to make our own choices, to do what we want, and to set our boundaries, to protect ourselves and also to meet our own needs. So that's an essential development that is happening over time. So as our children are growing and they're getting older, that we also give them these age-appropriate choices that they can make, so they can feel they have the agency, so they're not being told all the time, and that they can be their own, they can be free to express themselves and to make the choices that they know that they want to make, that feel good for them. Right. And that they can say no, because as adults, we want them to be able to say no when they want to say no, when it's not safe for them to just go along with others. Right. So we want them to have that independence and agency, and allowing them to have choices and make choices is what's going to develop that agency. Number 6, educate ourselves. So we as parents, we can learn about child development, what is going on at various stages of a child's development, those effective communication strategies at each level, and also the parenting tools to better understand our children and to build that strong relationship with them. And I've mentioned some of those today with you. So continuously learning as parents is important so we can also continue to evolve and also adapt to how our children are evolving and developing, because our environment is also changing, right? So our parents didn't have to deal with us being on devices all the time. We as parents do today. We all face the same dilemma of how do we create boundaries with the devices, with the media, because we know that it's not going to go away. It's actually part of our evolution as a human. And those gadgets are there to stay. But how do we help our children to manage so those gadgets don't take over the capacity to be a human, right? So staying updated and continuously learning like you're doing perhaps today, if what you're here and you're learning from me and from the information I'm sharing. And so continuously doing that is going to be key. And last but not least is to seek outside help. If you're really struggling to understand your children, and there's a lot of conflicts and there's a lot of triggers and strong emotions that you're experiencing yourself and your children experiencing on a continuous and frequent basis, then seek help, because help is available to you, and it's available in you, perhaps learning on the internet, you doing the inner work on yourselves, and also reading about child development, whatever the case may be. If you get to a point where you've tried a lot of things, then seek the help, right? Because again, I'm going to reiterate this, and because for me, I had to do a lot of work on myself to get to a point where I could understand what was going on within myself and with my own children. Because again, of those beliefs, perceptions, and expectations that we have, that we've acquired when we were growing up. And it's time now to update the belief if they're no longer working, if our expectations are causing more conflicts, then it's a sign for us to question those expectations that we have for our children, or even for ourselves for that matter. And by shifting and updating our belief, then we can have the capacity to understand our children and where they are at and the environment they're in today that they are developing in. Right? It's same as understanding another human being. It's the same with our children. Our children actually, we have their well-being at heart. And so we need to be able to understand them. And that requires that a lot of our old and limiting beliefs needs to be shifted. We all have feelings and emotions. And in order to be with our feelings and emotions, we need to do this inner work and to understand ourselves better. And when we can be with our own emotions, then we can be with our children's emotions. It's going to be easier because, again, we've changed the meaning, the belief when they are acting a certain way or behaving in a certain way or expressing emotions in a certain way. Right? We all know that our children are not meant to be controlled. We are here to guide them. So it's important for us parents to be aware and to make an effort to understand our children by actively listening, showing empathy towards them, and trying new things, which when we change our belief, then we're more willing to change our perspective, to see things under different lenses. And this is what's going to help us build a strong and positive relationship with our children. and also help others as well to do the same, right? And this has been my purpose. I'm here to actually help you parents to better understand your own needs, and so that you can understand your children's needs, interests, and as well to be able to attune to them. So this is where it's at, understanding our beliefs, our perceptions, our expectations that may be causing the triggers that we experience when we are not understanding our children. But by shifting the belief, then we can develop more capacity to understand our children. We have more capacity to be there when they're behaving in a certain way, that we don't get angry and we don't assume that they're doing it on purpose. And so if we can show up and we can be there and we can change and see things through different lenses, then we can be more curious and we can ask and understand our children, what is it that's going on with them? And so that's where that attunement becomes much more easier, and we can meet their needs. And when we meet their needs, there's no reason to grab our attention in a way that triggers, like behaving in a certain way that we as parents, we don't like them behave in that way. So this is what I wanted to share with you today. If you are ready to do this work, feel free to ask me any questions, or even if you're minutely curious about this work, about addressing your beliefs, perspectives, expectations, perceptions, habits, feel free to reach out to me. This is my gift that I've learned over the years, and that this is what I do with parents. This is what I'm good at. And so this is what is becoming natural for me to talk about. So feel free to reach to me, and you may see how things change for you if you're ready for it. It can change fairly quickly within just a matter of weeks and months. So take care, everyone, and thank you for being here and listening to me today.